we have everyone? Congratulations. I want to say this was a really good debate. I really enjoyed it. I thought all four of you all were impressive. Good job. The decision is a 3-2 for the affirmative from Winston.
I'm happy to go first. I sat and voted negative. Certainly congratulations on both of you for advancing to round 14 and the pre-semifinal. I think for me the desirability of the counter plan is the key question. I think the 2AR is correct in the analysis that the link, if the link can be mitigated enough, the action to get a permutation. But I don't think enough work has been done on the link. And although the answer on the there is there's a net benefit, but I disagree that that's insufficient. It kind of directs the debate to the DA. It's resolved there. I think the negative is ahead on the uniqueness and the impact. And the next question for me to evaluate is the link strong enough to overcome the firm? Is it true that the app solves or precludes the impact of the DA or solves it better? I do think the neg's ahead on the DA link, and the uniqueness arguments are strong enough to overcome the thumper. I do think that because the neg is ahead on the links represent DAs to the firm, and there's enough risk of the permutation engages the impacts of the DA. And finally, I do look and evaluate whether this app is going to solve the DA better, in which case the permutation is going to be preferred. But I find that argument about presumption from the second link argument, the DA isn't really addressed to a sufficient standard. And I think this link argument is dropped in the 1AR. It's articulated as terminal defense for the app solvency, both in the block and the 2NR. And I do vote on terminal defense. And so I do determine at the end that the counter plan is probably the most likely option to solve the impacts of both the app and the DA. And failing that there is a terminal defense solvency presumption issue with the app that also would result in negative ballot. And that's why I support it.
Okay. I don't necessarily disagree with any of that. I also sat. I think that the negative is ahead on the link question of the dissad. I think this probably causes breakup of NATO cohesion and probably some sort of damage to the NATO process. I think that the internal link change at the end, the impact of this being a terrible thing to do right at the moment when the Ukrainian offensive is escalating is really bad. I think this leads to Baltic escalation. I find the affirmative claim mildly compelling that this resolves, that it will resolve Chinese diplomacy in the long run, which then resolves sort of Putin being able to push back. I think I need more impact comparison there, but fundamentally I think that there is a time frame issue with the negative. I think that the impact probably is much more immediate, especially when they're framing this as right now, and a question of Baltic states and the question of the Ukrainian offensive, all of this leading to a hyper context of escalation right now, whereas the affirmative is very much like a structural question of, in the long run, China will view this as an export control lessening, and I don't know when you solve for that. In which case, I think that this just comes down to the question of, do I think the counterplan solves the affirmative? I think your NATO key evidence is not as good as you're playing it out to be, and I will say, props to the 2A. I love a 2A who lies and steals, right? And is going to go there and be like, this is the best. But
so
your lying, cheating, and stealing can only go so far. I've seen these tricks, and it's not good enough for me. In that world, I think the counterplan probably resolves the affirmative. I think that, in that case, I think there's a net benefit. And yeah, you're right. Maybe you get the permutation and the rule without the dissad, but you need to cover the dissad. I also think this is sort of a time allocation question in the 1AR, and you get the dissad with 20, 30 seconds left. That needs to be put forward. I mean, for me, I always think, what year are you all, by the way?
Seniors.
Oh, then I won't begrudge the, put the dissad before counterplan in case are you going to be debating in college? Fantastic. Where?
Trinity. Texas.
Why does the local sergeant have to get more competitive? Okay, well then, if I assume that I will be judging you in the future, and in the future put the net benefit before the counterplan, it makes it much easier for you to leverage that offense. Those are both good schools to go to, and I'm not just saying that because Ian's in the back of the room, and we're happy to
That's my guy right here.
Yeah, I'm happy to see you. I'm happy to see you in the local circuit. Anyway, that's it. That's me.
I can go next. I obviously vote affirmative. I agree with the time allocation issues on the dissad and the 1AR. The one argument that there are two arguments I felt like were pretty clearly extended on my flow. One was the thumper. I guess I'm giving that more credit in terms of taking out the dissad than the other two judges we heard from. I felt like the 2NR's response to that is that it wasn't evidenced. But there was evidence on it, 2AC, and the 1AR sends that fairly clearly. So I felt like that cut a pretty big risk of a dissad for me. I'm also a little more compelled, I guess, by the story about how the dissad or the case can solve the impact of the dissad. And even though I agree that you're ahead on the link, right? Like, I don't think they're answering the specificity of the like tech worker trade-off stuff that's in the 2NR. I felt like that made the risk of a dissent for me relatively low, and there was enough of a solvency risk of the app that made me vote for the affirmative. I also feel like, for me, more analysis from both sides on what the solvency deficit is on the counter plan vis-a-vis the case would have been helpful in terms of like how much of a risk of the, like if I'm believing your advantage scenarios, how much of a risk of a solvency deficit is important for weighing the case against it. But I agree that it was a really, really, really great debate, and you all have a lot to be proud of.
I can go next. I'm gonna be fast. I'm pregnant and I wanna go eat. So. I voted F. I went back and forth quite a bit because there were times where I thought the neg was winning on the flow. However, in the end, I did end up going to the counter plan and looking at the permutation. And I kind of went squirrel on this, and I thought that you guys did enough analysis to buy out of the DA, and then I also was looking towards the hedge argument and thought that that was also a point for me. So those are my big things.
All right, I'll go last. Yeah, I also voted out, so not to belabor the points, I agree with the last two judges. I think that especially where the strat at the end coming out of the negative team really goes all in on the counter plan as a disadvantage, and then AF comes back and sort of like extends that thoroughly and like, to me, wins pretty heavily, especially on the hedge. And I think they do enough work on the actual DA story and addressing how the actual evidence they're reading can address, or at least to some extent, why the counter plan is better than just the counter plan on its own and solves the DA. Ben?
I don't know if it's, is it gonna bother you if Arthur has questions, or if I do?
Can I ask questions?
I mean,
Like, whatever.
Alright, so, yeah.
I mean, yeah,
Alright, cool,
proceed.
sorry. For the 3 judges that voted affirmative, like, what was your thoughts on counterplan solvency? Like, how much of the AF, or like, did you believe is solved?
Well, you said you wanted more analysis on both sides on the solvency deficit. What was the solvency deficit you voted on, and why did you think that the AF or the perm uniquely solved for relations or whatever that scenario was for the Ukraine war in a way that counterplan alone did not?
I thought that the analysis at the top of the flow in 2AR, and it's in the 1AR too, about why NATO is key because of the perception in China that this is like, because they're perceived as an adversary, them acting uniquely gets China to like not aid Russia as much on the Ukraine scenario. That's very clear in the 1AC, also clear in the 2AC, less clear in the 1AR, but there. And I felt like there was enough said on that in the 2AR that I'm buying that there's a solve, that's something that the EU counterplan cannot solve.
The deficit is that the AF results in a decrease in transfer of arms from China to Russia, and that causes them to end the war?
That the AF is, the deficit is that the AF is, because NATO is a military alliance that's seen as adversarial to Russia, or adversarial to China.
I got that, yeah, that was the link that you said. But
correct.
why is that a reason that only the plan solves for, like, that internal link?
Because China doesn't perceive the EU the same way that China perceives NATO.
Right, but then you said, like, earlier you said that the impact with that is that would cause Russia, like, China's not aid Russia as much?
I believe that's the scenario that they claim as to why
That's
the
why.
Ukraine impact.
Okay, so you think that the reason that the plan solves, like, ends the Ukraine war is that China will stop sending weapons to Russia they're using in the Ukraine war?
Well, I mean, yeah, I think that's what they're saying their evidence says. I guess my point is that the AF can solve the advantage better than the EU because China perceives NATO as something different than the EU because it's an adversarial alliance.
And you think that whatever that internal link was, that the link differential is greater on the solvency deficit than between the link to the DISAD and not in ways that might prolong the Ukraine war?
I did, yeah.
Okay. Did you also, there was the solvency deficit you voted on also, that it will stop China from sending Russia weapons that it's not sending them in the war? Okay. You have a quick question?
the like thumper on the dissad for you, I guess, like why did you feel it took out so much of the dissad? Like that's the only argument you said, like you remembered on the dissad. So why did you feel
Well,
like?
It's the argument that's most clearly explained, that and the fact that they claim to solve the impact because of the Ukraine.
But like, why did you think this number about like unilaterally like arms control with Russia like mattered at all?
Well, their analysis in the 1AR is that it is one of the most recent pieces of evidence. Like you're critiquing other parts of their news, they're saying this evidence is from last week, and they post-date your link. And that analysis is in the 1AR on my flow, and I felt like that, when the 2NR is doing a wonderful job on a ton of things, on that specific point is less responsive. So I felt like that, like, was a lot to mitigate what you said.
No, stop.
Okay, and then that, and also like for the resources link as well. Do you think that gets that to close to 0?
I mean, I agree with you that
Because
you're ahead on the resources link for sure, but
well, that's the only one we extended.
yeah, I know. But if they're not in my flow again,
Yeah.
if you're not getting to that as much because the scenario is thumped by the fact that we just made a deal with you. You know, there's just a deal between NATO.
Yeah, my question was like, why do you think that like the U.S. deal with Russia over arms control between Ukraine, like why does that thump the dissent?
I mean, I think their analysis in the 1AR is that happened so recently that it should have triggered the dissad, but it
Well,
didn't.
I get it's recent, but how does it conflict with the link of the dissent?
How does that thump the resources?
Yeah.
Like, it's about the
It's about the US.
expense of integrating 5G, not like anything NATO does.
I guess I'm
is
perceiving,
contentious.
I guess I'm perceiving it as it's a thump on Russia's perception of how the alliance
I
reacts.
could see if we went for the cohesion link, like how, if that was contentious, that might fracture cohesion.
Sure.
That was the link turn, like they went for cohesion as a link turn, so it seems like this thumps that, it would reduce the uniqueness of the link turn, which the current plan also solves for. But I don't see how it would how does it take resources from NATO then, like, that's okay.
I guess more analysis like that into an R probably.
Well, I mean, it's hard to anticipate.
100%.
It's hard to anticipate that this thumper that was on a link we're not extending will be used to get the link we do extend to 0. You know, you only have 5 minutes, and we were, trying to not we wanted to we were erring on the side of over explanation and not trying
Sure.
to spread out or out tag or whatever, right? So I mean, I thought the explanation was pretty good, but I get it. I know that everyone's trying their best, and I understand that. We're not trying, and I'm sorry if he's trying to sink attention. So in some ways, I'm trying to let them vent, but I also
I 100%.
understand. It sucks. We we just needed one win today, and really thought we had one, and just we like them, and good luck to them. And I'm not trying to be disrespectful, but I also try to let them get a sense of closure before we leave, to try to get the best understanding possible of why they say lost.
Nothing any of you have said is even remotely.
And the way you've answered the question, same. Also has been I haven't at all taken it to be dismissive, even though it would have been very easy to be.
And then I had one last question for you two. You said you both agreed the counterplan doesn't solve as much as the AF, but to the degree that it didn't, why do you think the dissad was so low that it didn't outweigh?
I really started to go for the final rebuttal, because Neg had my ballot for quite a while. But then when they started to talk about some of the things that went unresponded, so I like the response that you guys gave about NATO, everybody had to agree or else it wouldn't have happened. But then they get up and tell me they haven't provided me any evidence of which countries would, or what most likely wouldn't happen here, right?
Yeah, I'm sorry to square it. It's just because we went for the link that we didn't go for it fractures NATO. We did say that that as a presumption, they would need that to solve, which would fracture that, the presumption ballot or whatever, but that wasn't the link so the last minute of the 1NR was just the expense that the app would cost, and the 1NR runs out of time, so that's what we go for. So it's not about this country objects to it, so there's a lot of fights over, which means we can't talk about how to save Ukraine. And so the resources that are used takes away from the resources we have to devote, which is the whole 2NR. So it's just it's okay. It's yes, we dropped answers to links we didn't extend, but why would we spend time answering an argument that we didn't extend, right? We just we explicitly said we were only extending the resources linked to this ad, that would interfere with the ability to, you know, like resources to Ukraine, because it would take away resources and we have that. So like, you know, yes, we didn't like answer a bumper or like link defense to the link we didn't go for. Sorry, I'm sorry, it's just,
You're,
yeah.
you guys are perfectly fine.
I don't know.
Yeah, and then it's very similar, like I more bought the analysis from the app that like, yes, even though it like it is going to take resources potentially away, that like the types of resources that are being expended are not necessarily going to like trigger the impact as much. And again, like I'm weighing this very heavily against like the app advantages, which don't go really, you're not going for it because your strat is like counterplan and DA in the very last speech. But I'm weighing that against the app case, and that's very similar to the previous judges.
What was, yeah, sorry, what was the deficit? What was the deficit though? Like, what do you think the scenario that the app doesn't solve for, that you think outweighs the deficit?
I think that, sorry, what was that?
What's the deficit to the counter? You understand we didn't extend the case defense because we extended the counter plan. But what was the deficit that you thought outweighed the disadvantage?
So the deficits are the hedge war that app goes for with the relations advantage. It's specifically when it comes to like the econ class. I think that you guys were winning on that up until the last speech where it wasn't really extended, and then app comes down.
I guess that's my only question. Do y'all think case DA would have been the better 2M mod?
At least for me, like 2 or 3 sentences on the econ probably would have picked that up.
Case DA would have been disastrous for me.
Huh?
Case DA would have been disastrous for me.
I don't think that would have been straight.
Yeah.
That's fine. We're good.
Yeah.
Thank you all.
Like, yeah, I'll say about that. Yeah, it's like, but it's not like, yeah, it's just like, yeah, I don't know. So it's like, you know, it's hard to know what to do. So, like, you know, like, I know, like, 2AR,